Bet the Board presents Stay Green. Stay Green is your first stop for all the metrics, matchups, and money-making opportunities at the track each race week. This is Stay Green, the NASCAR betting podcast. Here are your hosts, Todd Fuhrman and racing analyst Chris Werme.
Welcome into the Stay Green podcast, a Bet the Board production. And then there were one race remaining before we'll crown the 2023 NASCAR champion this weekend from Phoenix. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by professional NASCAR bettor, racing analyst, and I guess I'll call him a co-host around these parts, Chris Werme. And Wormser, it was an interesting weekend at Martinsville, to say the least. I don't think either of us were shocked, given the current form from the 12 car, that Ryan Blaney goes out there, passes Aric Almirola, and gets himself into the championship four.
I don't think we were surprised at Blaney winning. I think I was more surprised at the fact that he was dominant. I mean, at a certain point in the race, he was 6 seconds back of Almirola, and it was very calm and cool on the radio. And hey, you're going to catch him with 30 to go. And I'll be damned if he just made that look like the easiest, 6 second, like that here kitty I've ever seen in my life. And I know that he had 4 tires and Almirola only had 2, but I'm not going to lie. I sold all my Blaney bets when he got to be 6 seconds back. So I just didn't think he could make it happen, especially under green flag conditions. And the last thing I wanted to do was let pit road determine whether I win bets again. So I sold for a profit on those bets, but man, 10 minutes later, it was like, whoa, this is the fastest car, and he's for sure going to pass him. So very impressive performance. I'm not surprised that he won. I'm surprised how much better he was than the rest of the field.
Yeah, 168 lap green flag run to the checkered flag there. Didn't get any late cautions, restarts, or any shenanigans along pit road. For those folks who are tuning in to the Stay Green podcast for the first time, or if you've been with us ever since the season preview we did with Danielle Trotta, which feels like a couple lifetimes ago, we break things up into 3 distinct segments around here, and effectively, because it's a NASCAR show, we'll call them stages. Stage 1, all about what we learned last weekend, albeit not that much we can apply going forward from Martinsville, but some of the surprises, disappointments. Stage 2 will reset the championship 4, look at those 4 drivers, their odds to win their particular group, and of course, odds to win the race. And then in stage 3, some other drivers that we think can factor into some of your investment opportunities this weekend. So with stage 1, Worm, I mean, we mentioned Ryan Blaney's victory, but it wasn't just Blaney that was great. Fords in general all put on quite the show at Martinsville. Blaney comes home first. You mentioned Aric Almirola second, Chase Briscoe fourth, Joey Logano fifth. It was Denny Hamlin breaking up that particular parade. But when you look at Blaney, he came out there, did what it took to be able to get the job done. William Byron finishes the first car a lap down. He's able to point his way into the final 4, despite being a little bit nervous, apprehensive, call it what you will. And as Denny Hamlin said in his post-race interview, look, there's no margin for error once you get into the final phase of the NASCAR postseason. Denny was arguably one of the most consistent drivers, just could not overcome that 30th place finish at Homestead. And yet it's another season that the 11 will have to wait to try and win that elusive championship.
Yeah, the one thing that I don't like about Denny's comments is he kind of blamed it on a mechanical failure, and that's a very easy thing to do. I guess if you want to protect your ego. They just didn't get it done. And to be honest, he had a chance to win a race at Martinsville, arguably his best track. He's won there a ton. They just didn't get it done. They didn't have the speed, and they didn't adjust on the car properly, at least relative to Ryan Blaney, and wasn't able to get it done. So kind of a bummer season, because it did kind of seem like their season, that the 11 had the speed at every track that they went to. Denny was winning close races. They were able to keep their mistakes to a minimum toward the latter half of the season. And it just goes to show you how fragile these playoffs are. Whether you like this playoff system or not, it rewards perfection and lack of mistakes. And unfortunately, this 11 team, and they found themselves behind the 8 ball at Homestead, but still had a chance to get it done at Martinsville. Just didn't do it.
What do we make of the 19? I mean, clearly
Right.
dominant for extended stretches throughout the regular season. Hell, he was the regular season champion for a reason. And then you dig into some of his performances in the playoffs, and it's inexplicable when you consider that the 19's playoff average, I don't even want to do the math, barely inside the top 20, finishes 12th with everything hanging in the balance at Martinsville, 29th at Homestead, 9th at Las Vegas. I mean, he had one top 10 finish the entire playoffs, something that I don't think
That
any
is
of us
shocking.
saw coming. And you wonder if it's, outside the track. I know there were other situations that unfolded, but clearly they didn't have speed, race in, race out. And they have to be kicking themselves for what looked to be set up for the 19 to win a second career championship.
Yeah, his average finish was 19.7. Could
Not
you
good,
imagine
Bob.
if at the
Not
start of the playoffs, hey, I'm going to set the over under on Truex's average finishing position at 18. I don't think there would have been one human being or one NASCAR fan that would have said like, "Oh, the over has value there." And but this was kind of what happened to them last season, where they had speed, they couldn't get out of their own way, they were making mistakes. The same thing kind of happened in the playoffs, and I don't know where you place this blame. It's one of the bigger, I guess, head scratchers I've seen in NASCAR the last few years, especially when it comes to this playoff format. 2 weeks, let's just say we're at Watkins Glen. I don't know how Truex doesn't win the championship. And then, you kind of see how the first round of the playoffs went, that round of 16. It's like, oh my goodness. Like, if they keep this up, they're going to really struggle. It's a miracle they made it as far as they did. But ultimately, when it comes down to Martinsville, you just can't make a mistake. You just can't. And they had one speeding penalty, and that was it. The rest of their day, they're just, it's so hard to pass. It's so hard to make up positions. And if you go out there on pit road and you make a mistake, your day is over. That's how hard it is at this top level when it comes to the round of 8.
Anything else that you saw on Sunday that you think is worth highlighting before we kind of wave the green, white checkered flag on stage 1 and get right into stage 2?
I think we need to talk about William Byron and this 24 team. This was not one of those teams that actually that was guaranteed to make it into the round of 4.
I mean, not guaranteed, but you looked at the point cushion he came in with, and if history was any indication, he had to really screw things up not to make it. But let's not sugarcoat it. He tried to do everything he could to screw things up and still was able to find his way through, mainly because Denny Hamlin finishes 3rd and Denny's not winning that race.
Yeah, and it's crazy how quickly that changes. It only takes, one poor adjustment or one bad run at Martinsville to find yourself in 16th or 17th place. Couple that with the fact that Truex and Hamlin were leading early on. That means that Byron was up against Ryan Blaney, who was running in the top 5 at the time, which he didn't have as much of a lead over Blaney as he did on Hamlin and as he did over Hamlin and Truex. So the points flipped so quickly once Hamlin wasn't leading or once Truex wasn't leading. The one thing that I found interesting was, I know that I was talking about in the pre-race poll. I think for sure, obviously, you have Larson and Bell are in. I just considered Byron in. They haven't really missed a setup in a while. They hadn't really struggled. We haven't seen them, struggle to stay on the lead lap. And then they're doing that in not a must-win scenario, but it was a must-perform decent scenario, and they couldn't even pull that off. And it wasn't like, I guess Hendrick was down a little bit on speed. I mean, Larson was still kind of found himself in the mix there, and then to see his reaction after the race, and it was the hardest thing he's ever done. And, a lot of people were saying, well, William Byron's finally become a man. I know he's super young, but I think if you're this team, you kind of have to scratch your head and say, how do we miss that badly? And if we do that again at Phoenix, what does that say about, the momentum for the following year? Because this team has won 6 races. They were probably the fastest car at maybe 2 or 3 of those. So I think that they have to be a little concerned about their setup or the direction of where this 24 car is heading into Phoenix. I don't think it's a shoo-in that they're going to be qualifying in the top 3 and run in the top 3 all day.
No, that came kind of out of nowhere. I mean, when you watch practice, you go, okay, you can understand if they were a little bit slow in practice, but they go out there, don't qualify well, and really didn't ever factor into the calculations in terms of who we thought was going to be the actual race winner. But the 24 dodges a bullet there. They're into the Final Four, and we'll see if they're able to replicate the strong performance we saw from them in the spring. Wave the green, white checkered flag on stage one. Encourage all of you to follow Chris on X at Chris Werme 15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, to take you through the remainder of the football season as well, you can follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Worm, as we move towards Phoenix to start stage two, we look at the playoff four, but before we get there, we may as well lay out some of the track specs. Your de facto home track, unless you want to claim Michigan instead. I'll give you the option here and right now to pick one of those two. The track opened in 1964. It's a 1 mile flat oval with 11-degree banking in turns 3 and 4. That's the highest. It's essentially a short track and a flat track at that. There was a configuration change a few years ago, which adjusted some of the racing and the way teams tried to modify some of their setup. As far as track comps, obviously Phoenix 1 becomes the low-hanging fruit, but do you put any weight into how these drivers perform at New Hampshire when you're looking at driver performance at Phoenix as well?
I think it's something to make note of, but I don't take a lot of the gateway in New Hampshire. I think that not only is Phoenix a very different track that really is very track position dependent. I do not think that New Hampshire is as track position dependent. I think you're actually able to move around a little bit more in New Hampshire than you are at Phoenix. Unless you get a really hot day, it'll widen out. But, there's some elements of gateway, but ultimately I'm looking at just who's performed well at this track in the next gen car. We have 3 races. We have 1 from earlier this spring and 2 from last year. I think that is the majority of what I'm using to handicap this race.
It makes sense, and we may as well get right into the drivers. We'll rattle them off in terms of what their prices are this weekend. We can start with Kyle Larson, who is definitely a shade less than 2-1, plus 165. I've seen some books as low as 3-2. But that's to win the title. When you look at his odds to win the race, you get about a 10 to 15 cent value proposition, if you want to call it as such. As far as the FI's performance this year, he has 17 top 10 finishes to his credit, 14 top 5s, 4 wins. 2 of Larson's wins this season have been at Richmond and Martinsville with the same package that we'll use at Phoenix this weekend. As far as his current form, 1 at Las Vegas to get himself to the Final Four. So you can make the case that the last 2 weeks, he was obviously racing with house money, didn't have to place that emphasis on performing at Martinsville or Homestead even the week before. He's posted the best average running position of any driver in the playoffs, better than 8th. His average finish, not nearly as strong at 11.89, just 1 top 5 since the first phase of the postseason. When we look at his track history at Phoenix, 4th here in the spring after leading 201 laps, was 9th here last fall and 34th in the spring, the first time we came here in the next-gen car, had some engine issues. When we look at Larson, how are we handicapping him coming into the weekend?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they bring. If we look at last year, he had the 22 and Joey Logano go out and win in Vegas. I'm not saying that he struggled at the next tracks. I think he had kind of solid finishes, but you could tell that they were clearly just had their eyes set on this Phoenix or the championship race at Phoenix. I know that Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson have talked about how they just wanted to go out there and win races, whether it was Homestead and Martinsville, but ultimately I don't think you can ignore the fact that you've already moved on, and these next races really don't matter. I know that a lot of people are saying that maybe he doesn't have the same momentum coming in, but let's be honest here. He was the second best car. Even if he's a second best car at Homestead, that's still a pretty good run for someone that's already punched their ticket to the Final Four. And then Martinsville has never been a great track for him. I know he won there earlier this year, but he's just not great at managing his tires over the long run. So I didn't expect him to have, a race where he went out there and led a bunch of laps at Martinsville. I think that they were probably happy with the finish and head to Phoenix. It'll be interesting to see. I know that Hendrick has 2 cars in the Final Four here, but they have plenty of resources, and I'm just interested to see how this 5 team unloads. I'd be shocked if they unloaded anything but the best. I really do think that Cliff Daniels and that 5 team will have something that's set up well for practice and qualifying. I anticipate them to look very well heading into the race on Sunday. Now, not plus 175 good. Okay, let me be unequivocally clear. That is way too short to play. Anyone that doesn't have any money on Larson at this point, please stay away until after practice and qualifying. And even then, my advice still might be stay away.
No, it's fair. It's all price determined. I mean, look, you can think that Larson may have the best car, but you're not running to the window to bet him at less than 2-1. You're better off hoping that he unloads with an absolute rocket, goes out there, dominates in practice on the 5, 10, 20 lap averages, and maybe take a price in that plus 140 range, if so inclined, knowing that you have a hot rod working in your favor. From Larson to Ryan Blaney, the second favorite amongst odds makers. You look at his price to win the title. Slight tick better than 5-2, plus 260, some plus 270 out there as well. A little bit more aggressive price to win the race, north of 3-1 at plus 3.25. The 12 car never has won a Cup championship. The 5, the 20, and the 24 have combined to win 8 championships with some of the previous drivers there. Take that for what you will. As a NASCAR historian, aiming to be a back-to-back Penske champion, we know Joey Logano took home the hardware a season ago. And Blaney has the second most wins in career playoff races out of the championship for drivers with 4. But when we look at Blaney and try and make a case against him, he arguably has the weakest of the 4 pit crews when it comes to average time on 4 tire stops. And every 10th of a second will matter this weekend. Season stats for the 12 car: 17 top 10 finishes, 7 top 5s, 3 victories, 2 of them coming in the playoffs. As far as current form is concerned, 4 top 6 finishes over his last 5 races, highlighted by the win at Martinsville, a playoff average finish of 10.3, which does improve to better than 5th over the last 5 races. Second here in the spring, arguably the best car here last fall, but worked to protect his teammate, finishing second, was 4th in the spring of 2022. And he's got to be brimming with a lot of optimism and confidence coming to Phoenix, knowing that he's going to have a chance to win his first championship.
I mean, I have to give a shout out to Full Tank Phil on X, who brought up the point a few weeks ago after he won at Talladega and locked himself into this round of 8. Logano wasn't able to work his way into the round of 8. And he said, hey, this will be the first time that Penske can actually put all of their resources into this 12 team. What can they do? Well, I'll tell you what, they can make a really fast race car because this guy has been unbelievably fast week in and week out. And he was obviously very fast at Homestead and was able to go out there and win at Martinsville. I know he didn't have to win, but it certainly looks better when you can run someone down from 6 seconds back and kind of put an exclamation point on, hey, I am coming for this championship. If you look at track history here, you know, and I know we say track history, we're talking about next gen history. So it's only 3 races. It's the spring race from earlier this year, and then the championship race, and then the spring race from last year. His average finish is 2.7, and you could even put an asterisk next to that because his second place finish last year,
he wins that race.
Pretty much a first place finish in my book. So, and on top of that, his average start is 3.7. Both of those are the best in this series. So I anticipate Ryan Blaney to be an absolute bitch the entire weekend. It's just a matter of, can he put together an entire week? And he's done it these last couple of weeks. He hasn't made too many mistakes on pit road. Neither has his pit crew. And he's gone out there and done so well in practice that I think that that's given him some confidence in saying, no, I do have the best car. And I think that when you look at those practice times going into the race, you say, hey, everyone in the garage knows I have the fastest practice times. I think that can give you a little bit of an advantage going in, saying, you know what, I can get up underneath someone. I know that I'm going to have the drive off. I can side draft him down the straightaway and maybe make the pass. So not only have they done a great job at getting good finishes, but they put together entire weekends. And that's what champions do. They do a great job. They unload fast. They don't miss a beat. They qualify well. And they put together just a solid race on pit road. And then they let the driver say, hey, this is the best car. Go out there and win the race. I think that Ryan Blaney should be the second favorite. I think that Larson should still be the favorite just based on his ability to qualify and probably where a lot of the money is going to go too. I imagine that most people think that Larson's a shoo-in at this point, although it's a trendy pick to have Blaney as the favorite. So I'm not going to hedge anything. And for all intents and purposes here, I have a Larson future, a Bell future, and I am not sitting on a Byron or a Blaney future. So I will be hedging. Absolutely. When you hedge, when you can hedge and make money, I always do it. I'm not here to gamble. I'm here to make sure that I make money. I just don't know if now is the best time to enter the market, just because I anticipate Larson and Byron to qualify so well. I think we might see a better price on Blaney, but also I will not hesitate to fire on a lower price on Blaney if he does look that good in practice and qualifying.
We can get to the hedging before we close up shop, because I know the listeners that have been with us all season hopefully are sitting with a Larson ticket right around 7-1 in their portfolio, and are going to try and figure out how they can monetize that to the best of their ability. So, spoiler alert, we'll get to that a little bit later in the program. When we move further down the board and we look at William Byron, plus 320-ish to win the title, plus 350 to win the race. First title race appearance for his crew chief, Rudy Fugle. So if you're looking for a calming influence on the box, a little bit of a different dynamic there for HMS. His pit crew has the best average time for a 4-tire pit stop this season at a touch less than 11 seconds. The crew had the fastest average times at both Charlotte and Homestead this season. Homestead, they were sub 10 seconds, and every 10th of a second pays dividends. When we look at the 24 season in a nutshell, 20 top 10 finishes, 14 top 5s, 6 wins. Byron has 8 wins overall in the next-gen car. He aims to become the second driver to win a Cup championship in the 24 car, joining Jeff Gordon, the first since 2001. When you look at Byron, his string of 6 straight top 10s came to an end with his 13th place finish at Martinsville. He has been the model of consistency throughout the playoffs, but he has yet to win a stage in the postseason. One here in the spring after winning the opening stage and leading 64 laps in total. 6 last fall, 18th in the spring. How are we handicapping William Byron's weekend expectations?
That's kind of crazy that these numbers in NASCAR, that 24, that means so much to see that kind of written out, or at least to listen to it here, that hasn't been a champion since 2001. That's kind of crazy to hear, because those numbers mean something. Absolutely. There's still Jeff Gordon gear. There's still Jimmy Johnson gear. There's still Dale Earnhardt Jr. gear that you see. So it's kind of crazy that we haven't seen that 24. I mean, not crazy, but it will be nostalgic to see that 24 in victory lane if they do happen to unload fast and get it done. But listen, I think Byron's going to Byron, and that's been kind of be a top 5 car all day. I do think that last week is a bit concerning. I don't think it's going to spill over, but I do think that there's a little bit of head scratching going on in that 24 garage, because they were so good at Martinsville in the past. And then for them to kind of struggle, not a little bit, but a lot of bit, when they actually needed to perform. It's not like they were out there with looking towards Phoenix. That was not on their agenda at all. I guarantee Rudy Fugle was like, no, we got to make sure that we're getting into Phoenix. And for them to fall so short, and it wasn't like there was mistakes. It was William Byron saying, this car is not as fast. I am plowing center. I'm loose off. And the fact that he wasn't able to kind of work his way through the field, that's the first time we've seen that all year out of this 24 team. If he ever struggled, he was always working his way back up to the front. He just couldn't get it done last week. So I think it's just kind of a pause and regroup for this team. But when it comes down to it, I do think that if he finds himself in the top 5, if there's that late race caution and you have to go out there and win this race on pit road, it's hard to look much further than this 24 team and say, hey, that's the team that's gotten it done the most consistently all year. He's the guy that's been able to take advantage and win 6 times this year, when he's probably only been the best car maybe 3 times all year. That's what you got to do to win a championship. So I anticipate them to be there. I think he will need kind of a late race caution in order to do it. I cannot see him going out there and dominating, but it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens if there's a caution with 30 to go.
Hey, look, that's what Chase Elliott did last year to get himself to the championship before he ran into a little bit of a complication there, got shuffled back, and was never in the mix to try and win before Joey Logano took home the checkered flag. Last but not least, when we look at the championship 4, Christopher Bell, his odds north of 4-1 to win the title, 5-1 thereabouts to win the race itself. His season, 19 top 10 finishes, 10 top 5s, 2 victories. One of the 2 victories came in this most recent phase of the playoffs. When you look at Bell's pit crew, they have the 4th fastest 4-tire stop time this season. Crew completed a 4-tire stop at 9.26 seconds at Richmond in July while working with Ty Gibbs. So we know that's what the ceiling could be for them. Adam Stevens has been here before and won titles. Look, the man sitting on the box did it in 2015 or 2016 and 2019. When you look at Christopher Bell, playoff average finish just outside of 8th, second best among all contenders, top 8 finishes in 6 of his last 8 races. So he's peaking at the right time of the season. 2nd at Vegas, 1st at Homestead, 7th at Martinsville. When you look at his track history at Phoenix, 6th here in the spring, 10th in the championship last year, 26th in the spring before that. And last year, he started 17th in the championship race and ran as high as 5th, was never able never able to overcome poor track position to start. You have to imagine, given how well he's gone out there and qualified, that is going to be priority numero uno for JGR to give Christopher Bell the best opportunity to get himself a title.
And he's done just that this year. I know that it was mainly on 1.5-mile tracks, but that just means you still have speed in your race car. I anticipate Chris Bell to go out there and be Chris Bell. There will be times when you might think during the middle of the race that, Chris Bell's running 8th, and maybe the other guys are running in the top 5, and this is kind of it for Chris Bell. But you can't ever count him out. He's been as clutch as any driver we've had in the last couple of years, especially in this next gen car. He's been in must-win scenarios and was able to get it done. He's also been in a scenario at Homestead this year where he was barely a lead lap car and was able to somehow get some track position and take advantage of what was given to him. So I do think that he should be the underdog in this scenario. I do think that he could qualify well, but I think that where he's going to struggle is he needs to keep longevity in that race car. Although even though he's qualified, on the pole, I think 6 times this year, he's only got 2 wins, and he hasn't gone out there and dominated and led a ton of laps. I think that, he was very opportunistic at Homestead. He almost was opportunistic at Vegas, and he definitely got lucky, I think, to win the Bristol dirt race. So even though he's been there, it hasn't been with speed. It's been with just kind of being around and being clutch. So if that's what it comes down to, a late race restart or maybe a late adjustment, I do think that this 20 team could get it done. But I also think that they're properly priced as the underdog at this point.
And we can wave the green-white checkered flag on stage 2, talking about the championship contenders and what they'll have to do to perfectly encapsulate a good season for all of them and etch their name in the NASCAR history books. But Werme, NASCAR, as we know, obviously isn't just decided by the drivers that are fighting for a championship. There's a lot more at stake, and there's other chaos that can take place on the track. So as we get to stage 3, there are still other drivers worth paying attention to. And when we look at some of the familiar names, Kevin Harvick, the shortest odds of a non-playoff contender in that 16-1 range. Denny Hamlin, 25-1. Joey Logano, 25-1. Tyler Reddick, similarly priced. Brad Case, 60-1. I mean, of those drivers, anybody that catches your eye that you think is worth a slightly more lengthy discussion as we try and identify someone not in the championship 4 that could provide a profitable opportunity for us?
Well, I definitely want to talk about Kevin Harvick. I think that if there was someone that could win this race that's not in the championship 4, I think it's this guy. I know he opened at 25-1, kind of swiftly bet down to this 16-1 price where he's pretty much universally across the board at this point. He's going to need long runs. He's also going to need a long run early in the race. I don't anticipate him qualifying well. Even when he was arguably the best car over the long run earlier in the spring, he didn't qualify necessarily well. I think he started in that 15th place, 13th to 15th, and was able to drive his way up through the field, but it was very methodical. He was eventually able to inherit the lead from Kyle Larson, but all of a sudden there's a caution, and Kevin Harvick did Kevin Harvick things, which is, that a slow, I think, back left or back rear tire, and found himself actually they took 4 tires. Everyone else took 2. So he ended up restarting late in 8th. And you just can't do that at Phoenix, especially if guys in front of you have speed and you have 2 tires. I just don't think this 16-1 price is going anywhere at this point. You might as well wait, see how he looks in practice, hear some of the comments from him and Rodney Childers. But I do think that the 25-1 price obviously was quickly bet down, was probably a little bit of value, but I just don't see someone outside of those championship 4 winning this race unless there's weird circumstances. But if that were to happen, I would think Kevin Harvick could do it.
It's just so difficult the way things set up, and whether we believe NASCAR allows these teams to tinker with the cars a little bit more that are vying for a championship, or they set things up differently because the non-championship contenders get raced a little bit differently, and they'll race differently around the 4 that are trying to win a championship. And so some of the other drivers that we mentioned, I mean, look, Joey Logano was lightning fast here in the past. I mean, his current form, 3 top 10s in the last 4 races, was great last week. And we look at track history at Phoenix. He won a championship here for a reason. He didn't have the fastest car on that day, but if there's speed in the 12, there's reason to believe there'll be speed in the 22. I'm just trying to look at some of these other guys. You're probably not running, to your point, to bet them in the outright market, but maybe you make a case to bet them in a top 3, a top 5, some of the head-to-head matchups that are there. So as we get into some of the other drivers not named Kevin Harvick, wasn't sure if you had a quick thought.
Yeah, I also want to touch on your point about the way that these guys are going to drive the championship for. I can't imagine that Kevin Harvick in his last race in the Sprint Cup, the Cup Series.
You want to call it the Nextel? You want to call it the Winston Cup? What do you want to go after next?
Yeah, in the Winston Cup. I don't think he wants to be remembered as the guy that was racing with Ryan Blaney or Chris Bell and kind of screws up a championship because of hard racing. I think that if he gets a chance in a long run, I think any of these guys, whether it's Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, if they get a chance in a long run, I could see them going out and passing the leader as long as, there's no affiliation, right? You're not going to have Joey Logano is not going to go out there and pass Ryan Blaney if he's leading. I'm pretty sure that Joey Logano will repay the favor that Ryan Blaney paid to him last year. But if there's just, if someone's losing a handling and someone like a Harvick is coming on the long run, they're going to pull the hell over and just let them go. But I just can't see on a late race restart. I can't see Harvick sticking it in there to make it 3 wide on 2 championship contenders. Maybe Joey Logano would do that, but not if one of them is his teammate. So I think that's why you're seeing these inflated prices on guys that you typically wouldn't see a 25-1 price on. So that's going to be everyone in the field is going to think that way, but especially Kevin Harvick. The last thing he wants to do in his last race is have kind of this whoopsie daisies kind of moment. That's just not the way he is. But if we want to talk about, there's 2 other guys I do want to touch on, and that's Tyler Reddick and Brad Keselowski. I'm going to start with Tyler Reddick. He did finish here 3rd in the spring, but it wasn't a true 3rd. He ended up taking 4 tires and was able to be advantageous, having 2 restarts. And he was kind of the one that shoved Byron to the win, in my personal opinion. I don't know that he was a top 5 car. He wasn't really discussed throughout the entire day until the very end. So yeah, it was a very opportunistic finish. I think his average running position was higher than where he finished, which I know it was for a fact. So whenever you can do that, that's just a good finish, and that's a good job by the driver getting more out of the car that was given to him. However, if we look back at these last couple weeks, Homestead, or even you could go back to Vegas. I mean, these are tracks where we thought the 45 would have a chance. You go to Vegas, you go to Homestead, and then you go to Martinsville. I mean, for him to struggle as much as he did at Martinsville and Vegas, or not Martinsville, excuse me, Homestead and Vegas, that kind of says to me that this team is not where they were early at kind of the start of the playoffs when they had a chance to win a couple races. Yeah, they were not even in the same zip code as other fast cars. So I think that this 45 team, I think that they made great strides this year. I just don't know that they're on the same level as some of these other teams. And, you find yourself on a hot, slick racetrack. I think Tyler Reddick's good, but I don't think he's great at managing his tires. I think that you might see Reddick fall off a little bit. So if anything, he's on my fade list. And then I want to talk about Brad Keselowski. I'm not saying Brad can win the race, and I'm not telling you to go bet him at 60-1, but I also think that Brad K has as good a shot as Tyler Reddick to win this race. And if that's the case, then 60-1 price is a way better than a 25-1 price. He was pretty strong here in the spring. I know that he ended up with an 18th place finish, but he was kind of racing up front. And this was before Brad Keselowski was actually fast. I think the RFK last year, if you even look at the spring, they are years ahead of where they were just earlier in the spring. So if you take that from last year, they're light years better than where they were last year. So he was very competitive here in the spring. I know he had a late race issue. I think his driver rating was over 100 still, and he was kind of mixing it up in that top 5 all day. I don't hate this price. I don't think he can win the race, but I think there is a 2-1 price. I'm going to give a freebie here. There's a 2-1 price on Bet365 for Brad to finish in the top 10. If you do have access to that, you should go ahead and play that. I think he's down to 140 a lot of other places. I don't like him at that 115 price. Is kind of readily available everywhere, just because I think you'll be able to find that price after practice and qualifying. So I don't think you're stealing any value. at this point, getting in that plus 115. But 2-1 is a pretty handsome price. I think it's only on Bet365, and that was earlier today. Since then, I don't know if it's been bet down, but I definitely like Brad this week. They've been competitive. I think he's been clearly better than Buescher. They've kind of taken a sideways step. So I do like Brad this week. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fit him in other than that 10-1 or that top 10 price. But, after practice and qualifying, you have your 4 that are racing for the championship. Go ahead and take a look at that information and see if there's some matchups, some guys that are not competing in the championship, and you could potentially find some value on guys like Brad Kay or even Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. Look, I know that the telecast on NBC is going to talk about the 4 drivers that are fighting for the championship. They'll be featured prominently from start to finish when they drop the green flag and throughout the course of the race. So you may forget there's 30 plus other drivers that are in the mix, but as a NASCAR bettor, there's going to be available opportunities, whether it's jumping on some of these head-to-heads pre-week or looking to try and build an outright card. This wouldn't be the week that I would go crazy with outrights. I'd probably look at more of the top 3, top 5, top 10 markets above all else, because we know that there'll be one playoff driver that encounters trouble in some capacity. It's just the way things work. And, other drivers are going to slot into the mix that odds makers may not give that much credit to. So there's some unique ways to make money. It is a different handicap this weekend than any of the other 35 races, point-paying races that we go to throughout the course of the season. Green, white, well, I guess it's not the green, white checkered flag. I'm going to wave the checkered flag for the final time on Stay Green this season and encourage all of our loyal listeners to follow Chris on X at Chris Werme 15. You can follow me on X as well at Todd Fuhrman, and most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And since Werme, I botched this last week, where can our loyal listeners go to get up-to-the-minute race updates from you on the pre-race poll on Sunday? What's the schedule look like?
No pre-race poll this week.
No pre-race poll. Biggest race of the season and no pre-race poll.
Yeah, no pre-race poll. It's just so hard when I'm going there. And you know how it goes. Like, this is a big deal for me. And because it's a big deal for me, everyone thinks that I want to host a bunch of people to come. So I have a lot going on Sunday. So what I'd like to do is, I think it'd be really important to make sure that we get a hedge out on the website.
Okay.
So we'll get that posted. And if there's a best bet, I certainly think that we'll be able to get something out there. But ultimately, I want to make sure that the listeners that are holding that Kyle Larson 7-1 ticket can have a chance to hedge, because I'm a big proponent of hedging. I don't think that, I don't want to go out there and take a risk. Now, it'll be calculated risks if I do that, but I do think that there's a chance that someone's going to be as good or better than Kyle Larson, potentially in the long run. And we want to make sure that we're able to profit from, we beat the market as much as we did. I think there's some 7-1, even some 8-1s that my dad was so quickly to point out. Once I gave out 7-1, he laid an egg, and my dad's like, "Oh, if you like them at 7, should I add some at 8?" Yes, Dad.
Look at Papa Werme getting the best of the number, trying to double down his position, increase exposure accordingly as a result.
Yeah, exactly. But from a best bet standpoint this week, I'm going to stick with Kevin Harvick. The top 10 run he's got going here, I thought he was the best car over the long run earlier this year. And so he's a pick'em right now at Superbook at -110 over Tyler Reddick. I think that Reddick is kind of sliding. I think that they're probably ready for this season to be over. I think Kevin Harvick's going to be solid over here. He might not qualify great, but I think, 50 laps into a run, I think you'll be seeing him have the least amount of fall off. And I anticipate him to kind of be around that top 5 on the final restart. And so I don't think we'll see Reddick in that area. So I kind of like that price. I like that price out to -130. I think that there's some -125s out there. I definitely like that as well, but certainly at Superbook at -110, Kevin Harvick over Tyler Reddick.
It's all about identifying opportunity, and it shows its face in a number of unlikely places, especially in a race of this magnitude. I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's made this show possible throughout the course of the season. First and foremost, our producer, DG, a man behind the scenes that makes us sound better than we really are. Unlike a lot of the podcasts, though, that folks will listen to on a week in, week out basis, what you hear is what you get. There's no editing. There's no cuts being made. If Werme and I say something stupid, you're going to hear it first and foremost on this very show. But he creates the slick intro and outro and allows the podcast to get circulated to you, the listeners. So want to give him credit for that. Want to shout out Derek Yoder as well, who stepped in and did quite the job as a fill-in host on my behalf when I was traveling during the summer months. I know you and him work closely together, have good chemistry, so maybe we'll find a way to get Derek more involved if I need a week off here or there during the course of next season, as well as a host. To all the members of the NASCAR betting community, those folks that are creating content, they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into doing this stuff, not reaping the benefits, the compensation, or some of the other things that a lot of content creators are able to find. You guys and girls do an outstanding job, and don't want anybody to ever, throw in the towel or feel frustrated that your work isn't appreciated. I know Chris and I take full advantage of having a platform this large, and it's great to see everybody else working to try and improve the overall NASCAR discourse. We can only hope, Chris, that sports books out there will continue to increase their betting menus and give us a lot of those yes-no props. I know you and I will crunch some numbers during the offseason. I'd love to be able to get no prices on some of these elite drivers in the top 10 market.
Oh, yeah.
Because no matter how you feel about William Byron or Kyle Larson, I am more than happy to take plus 220 week in, week out on some of these guys, knowing that calamity is right around the next corner. And also a special thanks to a lot of the guests that we had. I know I'm going to leave some off, but Danielle Trotta was on first and foremost with us, gave us her valuable time. Larry McReynolds, who I know folks love his commentary on Fox when Fox gets the NASCAR season back. Regan Smith, Adam Alexander, Alan Cavanna, Bob Pockris, Jeff Gluck. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting. If I do, I apologize for that. We appreciate all of you for giving us your time. We know how passionate you are about the sport and how little time you have during the 38-week season, I guess that we're going to call it. Next year, a little bit longer with an Olympic break. And, hopefully when we run this back next year for Stay Green, we'll have a few other wrinkles to try and get involved. There are a couple of guests that I know I want to get in the fold. There are a couple of guests that we reached out to this year who never returned emails, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But wanted to give you the floor as well as we put a bow on what I think has been a very fun and enjoyable season. We've had our ups and we've had our downs, like any gambling show will during the course of a regular season.
No, I just appreciate all the support. When people reach out and say, hey, this is fun, that they're enjoying watching NASCAR, and to hear people say that it was a Bet the Board pod, the Stay Green podcast that kind of got them into NASCAR betting. And now they find themselves week in and week out looking at lines and having a conversation, discussing what they think might happen in this week's race. That's what we're here for. So, and also thanks to you, Todd. I know that a lot of people don't realize how much time and effort you put into these podcasts. I don't know how you do it, but every day every Wednesday I get the outline, and I have a very understanding significant other who realizes that when we get a confluence of sports at Bet the Board with NASCAR, college football, and the NFL, she gets about 3 hours of quality time. And look, that may be what keeps our relationship strong, because if she had to deal with me 24/7, Worm, as you know, it's not the easiest thing. But look, it's a labor of love. We're extremely fortunate to get to do what we want to do with our time. And we'll figure out things that we can do to make this show even better going forward. I will say, spoiler alert, we will not be branching out into a weekly truck show. I have no desire to do anything close to that. Xfinity, I don't see on the horizon, but we both love the Cup Series. We love the interaction and feedback, and encourage folks to continue to share the show on social media. That's what allows this to grow. Hopefully we'll be able to figure out some things and iron out some details behind the scenes in terms of what the setup will look like for 2024 and potentially beyond. But I didn't want to cut you off. So no, I agree with all that. That's
so have a good time.
Way, how crazy is it? Hey, we started the year, like, I know that with being single, and now we're both married. So pretty successful year for us. Even if you take away everything else.
Single is all relative. We can go out and do what we would have wanted back in the day. But yes, married men now, it's amazing how much things can change in a season. Have a good time this weekend at the race. And I know that you encourage all of our Stay Green listeners, if they happen to find themselves in Phoenix, Worm will bust out the credit card. He'll buy an overpriced beer, a bottle of water, and maybe
I'm not buying water.
Maybe I'll try and help him out. Look, you got some people out there that aren't drinkers. So if they want a cocktail, you can buy them a Heineken Zero, whatever the hell they sell.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, I'll do that.
For Chris, Werme, and everybody around the Bet the Board home offices, want to thank all of you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in each and every week throughout the course of the season. And most importantly, we had a best bet on this show with Kevin Harvick over Tyler Reddick, but we all know what we're rooting for. It's getting that 5 car to victory lane and getting that juicy cash at 7-1. be sure to check the website. We'll have some potential hedging scenarios available for you. We'll do everything we can to get that up Saturday night or Sunday morning before football takes hold. So best of luck with all of your final race weekend investments. And come February of 2024, we'll be right back here with you, hopefully in some capacity, to talk about Daytona and the 37 plate races that NASCAR has decided to add to the weekly grind.
All right. Cheers.